All right, everybody, officially live. We got some attendees that are still trickling in. We're a couple minutes before the official start time, so I'm going to let some of those attendees kind of come in. But thanks for taking the time in the middle of your afternoon to go through some financial planning basics. We have Stephen in the office, who's an advisor at Kennedy Financial. We're up on the screen there. And then Betsey Rubel is going to be our featured guest speaker, who's an estate planning attorney and is going to talk through some general estate planning documents and then some changes, that are kind of in place with COVID-19 and social distancing, all that good stuff. So I'm going to give people a minute or two, maybe not even before we officially get going from there. And we'll kind of get started from there. Pull up some of my notes here. You guys are all set to go?
Okay. I am good over here. I'm socially distanced.
All right. Yeah, we're at Kennedy Financial. We're back in the office. It's still strange. Our Columbia Center building is basically closed. We've been here kind of on week 4, I think, of being back in the office, which is very nice.
Yep.
We're excited for that. We're still kind of waiting for the building and their guidelines on just when we can get the public back in. But through this, and part why we're here today is we've been doing a lot of digital communication, a lot of Zoom meetings, trying to kick out content on social media. And now we're launching, this is the first of a series of webinars. We're going to do the last Wednesday of every month to educate, give you some perspective, talk through things that are timely. And, in this environment, things are constantly changing. So we are going to be there to get you updated content and, communicate that in an easy way, hopefully. So I'm going to officially get this kicked off. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to go through, a couple of areas that are timely in the year 2020. What a crazy year it's been. We're about halfway through, and who could have guessed we'd be in this environment? My name is Brandon Kennedy. I'm the owner and lead financial advisor at Kennedy Financial Group out of Troy, Michigan. And I'm joined by Stephen Fronrath, who's another advisor here at Kennedy Financial, and Betsey Rubel, who's an estate planning attorney that we work with a lot of our clients. And our goal today is to, like I had alluded to a little bit before, is just provide some education on a couple of areas that are timely for this environment that we're in. I'll give you a quick intro to myself and Kennedy Financial, kind of what we do. I've been working as a financial advisor in this industry for about 20 years and started Kennedy Financial 12 years ago. Worked for a major wirehouse firm. It was very much about the firm and the revenue and the growth, and made a decision to start my own firm to be, take a personal approach. And we really value the client relationships that we have. And it's our goal not to overwhelm clients and show them how smart we are, but to really just be a guide on their financial journey, help them make smart decisions about wherever they are in their financial life, and that produces good outcomes. Certainly in times like this, having a guide, having a partner to talk through some perspective, to provide some education on how you navigate a market like this, an environment like this, is where we can add a lot of value. And, we're very proud of the firm we've created. Stephen's a great partner. He's going to help kind of walk through some areas. We've got some big announcements coming up in the next month or so that I can't release yet, but a couple new team members that we're very excited to bring to Kennedy Financial, and we'll continue to do these things over time. So with that said, I'll go over a couple of housekeeping items. Our goal, this will probably be 30 to 40 minutes, trying to keep it brief. We don't want to overwhelm you with stats and all that good stuff. Okay, here's we can go. Let me go back to that one real quick. This is all our compliance and attorney's advice on all our disclosures and all that good stuff. So you can read through that. Betsey's not affiliated with Kennedy Financial. We're separate entities, but we're here today just to kind of share some information. Nothing's a guarantee of results. This isn't tax advice, but hopefully you can have some takeaways on investments, on taxes, on estate planning that you can then take into your individual situation. So that'll kind of be the format today. I'm going to talk about the markets and what's going on there. Steven's going to talk about the CARES Act, some potential, that was passed through this, some potential opportunities that still are there and certainly could be available to us for the rest of the year. And then, like I said, Betsey's going to get into estate planning through COVID-19, but then give a general overview of some important documents and plans that you might want to have in place. There's a chat function in the bottom right-hand corner. If you have questions, please feel free to put those in there. If it makes sense for us to answer them, we'll monitor them as we go. To answer them right as we're going, we'll be happy to do that. We'd like this to be, conversational in any way it can be. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So you don't necessarily have to save them. Nicole's on here. We'll help kind of compile them. We'll be checking them and we'll make sure we get all those questions answered. So that's kind of the goal for today. I will introduce Steven in just a minute, and he'll kind of go to Betsey. But I'm going to jump right in for this presentation, and my focus of this portion is going to be on the current market. What can I say, right? It's been, you hear this analogy that the market is a roller coaster. This has been an incredible ride, if that's the analogy. We have up through February, things were pretty good. Unemployment was very low. Tax rates were low. We were still at the, kind of moving through what was a decade-long expansion from the 08-09 crisis. And, LPL Research does a very good job. That's our, who we're affiliated with for on the broker-dealer side. They do a recession watch. There were really no indicators of any large degree that we were coming close to a recession or a major slowdown. And then what happened? We heard some inklings in January. Certainly by February, it all kind of becomes a blur. But COVID-19 and the coronavirus, was here in the United States. And all of a sudden, we had forced shutdowns. We had closures. We had fear in the streets in a lot of different ways. You've seen all the stats now with where we're at today and this is only 3 or 4 months. It seems like a blur, like I said, but 2.4 million cases in the United States, 120,000 deaths. These are scary, numbers and figures. These are, real families that are impacted. 20 million unemployed people. By far the biggest number that we have ever seen. And all of this happened in a very short period of time with a forced shutdown. We were basically put in a forced recession, and it now is official. We are in a recession. A couple of days ago, it was official where we have basically a recession is just 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth in the United States. So that has officially happened. It's not a surprise. Government, we kind of had shutdowns. The economy basically stopped for a period of time, and there was a lot of fear in the middle of that. So what happened in the markets from the high of February 19th? We had hit a new all-time high ever in the stock market, and within 20 days, we were in a bear market, which is all that means is it's a 20% downturn from the previous high. That happened in 20 days. About 10 days later, more fear was in the market, kind of concern of what companies are going to be around, what companies can get on the other end of this. How long is this going to be around? And we had a decline over 30%, 34% in the S&P 500, 37 on the Dow. The 30 largest companies in the United States were down in value 37%. This is where, in the middle of this is where the media really sinks their teeth into these things, right? So you saw headlines like the market's in free for all. We are going towards another Great Depression, right? This is going to be worse than 08 and 09. They eat this stuff up because they sell advertisements, and their job is to not provide perspective, to not provide education. It's to have headlines, and there were lots of opportunities. Markets down 7 or 8% in a day. Those are scary times, and it's they start using the 4 most dangerous words in investing. This time it's different. And that's my goal today. I'm gonna try to just paint a little bit of a picture of what is reality. This time it's different is very dangerous to say. Now, in some fashion, it is different, right? We did not go through COVID-19. In 08 and 09, we had never gone through that kind of financial collapse and big investment banks failing. In the tech bubble of the early 2000s, we had never seen that kind of growth lead up to that kind of a collapse. And then we had 9/11 right in the middle of that. So it's always different in some fashion. Whatever the crisis of the day is going to impact the market. But we've seen these sorts of declines before, and we've navigated these before. And that's what we want to talk through from some perspective. So if you guys have worked with me, I know we have a lot of different people on this call today. We have some existing clients, some employees of 401k plans that we manage. We have some newer people who have never heard of Kennedy Financial or they're just kind of kicking the tires on what we do and signed up for this webinar. I use this chart a lot, and we pride ourselves on giving plain English recommendations and next steps and not showing a lot of charts, but this is probably one of the best ones that's out there. And here, let me walk you through a quick overview so you're not overwhelmed and looking all over the place. This is basically the last 40 years in the stock market. And what it shows is in these gray numbers, it shows the calendar year return. So, last year, a very good year in the stock market, 2019, the market was up 29%. That's the S&P 500. And you've seen some really bad numbers, right? In 2008, the market was down 38% in that calendar year. What's even more interesting, though, is these red numbers that you see scattered throughout. And that is from a new high that was hit. What was the intra-year decline to a new bottom sometime throughout that year? So like I said before, in 2020, we were up about 6% in the market by February 19th in just about 6 weeks to start the market. And then we had a 34% decline from that. I think the low of the market, at least the low that we've hit to this point, was a 34% decline. It happened kind of in the middle of March. These declines have happened before, though. These, intra-year declines of 10, 15, once in a decade or so, and it's not like clockwork. Nobody can time the markets. We will have these declines of over 30%. The last one before that, like I said, was 08 and 09. The financial crisis, you had banks collapsing, you had real estate market, subprime loans. It was a mess on Wall Street and in the financial institutions, and there was an intra-year decline of 49%. You can go back to the tech bubble and then 9/11. You saw 30 and 40% or 30 and 34% declines in those 2 years. Then you go back to 1987. In one day, Black Monday, the market was down 22%. And why I show that and share that is because we will have these type of markets all the time, right? These are going to happen. We are going to run into these things. And it's our behavior in the middle of that and how we respond to those downturns without emotion. And we have to have a plan and a process because, and again, this is not a guarantee of what happens and what the results might look like, but look at the years of big declines. 1987, when we were down 34%. The next couple of years, we were up 12 and up 27. Those were very good recoveries. We actually ended the year positive. We were up 2% in 1987. And let's fast forward to today. You can look at all the other ones, but let's fast forward to today. If I would have told you that 2 million people were infected with a virus and 120,000 of them, unfortunately, have passed away, and through that, we really haven't found a cure and we don't have a vaccine and we haven't figured out what the economy is going to look like. But now the market is back to flat. We are back to even. Today's another volatile day and we'll probably have continued volatility, but this is why we have to stay invested. Our investment philosophy overall is very much this, because the positive on all of this over the last 40 years is if you could withstand those and you had a plan and a process to not panic and to not sell out of your investments when things are down, the average return of the last 40 years in the market was 8.9% plus that dividends of around 2%. So your return on an average annualized basis, and again, not a guarantee of what's going to happen in the future, was about 11% annualized. It didn't go up 11% each year. If that was the case, we wouldn't be in business. Everybody would go, to their bank and say, I want that 11% fund. It just doesn't exist. We have to have a process to invest through good times and bad times. But by the way, $1,000 invested in 1980 would be worth about $65,000 today. Through all these crazy downturns, these uncertain times, at the moment, it seems like this time it's different. It's not. What we own, and this is part of our investment philosophy, is the most well-financed, largest companies in the world that are creating innovation and disrupting the way we do things. And we want to be owners in those companies through good times and bad. And what we sign up for is 3 out of 4 years, 30 out of the 40 years, we're going to be positive, right? So people ask, should I invest money now? Odds are on your side. 75% of the time, your next 12 months are positive. But you have to be in for the bad times. Any year, the average into-year decline is somewhere around 14% from a high to a low. You have to be comfortable with that. And every decade or so, sometimes, it's 6 or 7 years. Sometimes we go maybe 15 years. There will be a major decline. There will be a crisis of that day. And that's where you have to have a plan. You have to stick through that plan. You have to have a process. We act as a guide with clients to make sure that we live that process and that plan out. And those that are doing that and stick through their plan through good times and bad are a whole lot better off than those that don't. So that's just a general overview of our investment philosophy. One of the things I wanted to do is just with all that information, I probably should have asked it before. We have a little poll feature that we're going to do every month hereafter, because this is an uncertain market and nobody really knows what this is going to look like. Stephen, can you pull up that poll? We just want to see what your guys' thoughts are on the market's flat today. We've gone through, down 34 and then, a pretty big recovery to get flat. What is your guess? If I would have asked this question in April, it would have been certainly a different answer. Is the market going to be up 10% or more to end the year? Is it going to stay flat and kind of be the same? Or are we going to get worse, and is it going to be down 10% or more? I hope I'm not disappointing anybody, but I don't have a crystal ball and I don't know the answer to that. But I know our process works long-term, and we'll let kind of some of these filter in as I introduce Stephen. They're coming in as we go, but Stephen is an advisor at Kennedy Financial. I met him 7 or 8 years ago, and I'll tell you, I've met lots of people in this industry. I don't know that there's anyone that has a passion for financial planning and, just being there, acting as a guide that really resonated with people. And he does that day in and day out with a lot of the clients at Kennedy Financial. And he's going to talk through the CARES Act and some of the opportunities that have come from the CARES Act. So, all right, we're kind of got a mixed bag overall. We're mostly all in there, but does that post the results? I don't know, Stephen. Do you know if that's
yes? Yeah, everybody should be able to.
56% are saying it'll be up. To see that, okay, yeah. So 56% saying that we're going to be 10% or more. So we got some bulls, some optimists out there. About a 30 or 37% say we're going to be staying flat, and that's all right. Some of us think it might get worse. Who knows, right? There's so much uncertainty. Where's the economy going to go? Are cases going to get worse? There's so much uncertainty in the very short term. And you're talking, that's only 6 months. When you create an investment plan, it's not for 6 months. It's for the next decade, the next 20 years. Creating some legacy, changing your family tree type dynamics is why we invest for the long term. All right, so I went way over my allotted time, which sometimes I do. I apologize for that. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen, who's going to talk about the CARES Act, and we'll get going from there.
Perfect. Thanks, Brandon. So yeah, as Brandon mentioned, today I'm going to talk just a little bit about the CARES Act. The CARES Act, if you don't know, was a major bill that was passed by Congress back in March, really when the beginning of all this coronavirus and COVID-19 stuff was happening, really as a relief bill to help individuals and businesses get through these really tough times. A lot of what the news media has covered over the past couple months that you probably heard the most about were probably the stimulus checks that you may have received, and then the Paycheck Protection Program for businesses out there. So while those have been the ones that have gotten the most attention in the media over the past couple months, I wanted to talk through three different things today that you may not have heard of, or maybe you didn't really hear a ton about during all of this. The first one I wanted to talk through is the fact that required minimum distributions, or RMDs for short, have been waived for 2020. So if you don't know what an RMD is, essentially if you have a pre-tax retirement account, so whether that's a traditional IRA, a SEP IRA, a simple IRA, pretty much any retirement account that you haven't paid taxes on just yet. When you turn 72 years old, it used to be 70 and a half if you turned 70 and a half before 2020. But when you turn 72 years old, the government wants to get their money. You haven't paid taxes yet, and the government wants to get paid. So they're going to require you to take a certain amount of money out of that IRA every single year. And that's called an RMD, or a required minimum distribution. One of the big things that came out of the CARES Act back in March is that for this year, for 2020, if you had to take an RMD already, you are not required to take that for this year. So there are definitely some people out there, if you are retired, if you're taking money out of that IRA to live on and to help supplement your income, that doesn't affect you. You can still take that money out of the account. But if you're somebody who you don't need that money right now, or you're just continuing to let that money grow, maybe you're still working, you do not have to take that RMD out for 2020. So again, there hasn't been any word on whether that's going to change for 2021, but at least for this year, if you do not have to take an RMD, you don't need to. If you do, you can, but overall, it's going to be waived for 2020. The next item that I wanted to talk through, one of them, while it's not directly related to the CARES Act, one of the things that was announced back when the CARES Act was passed was the fact that the tax filing deadline was going to be pushed back from April 15th to July 15th for this year. Most of you that are out here probably have already filed your taxes already. If you haven't, hurry, it's getting pretty close to that date. But one of the little known features of the fact that the timeline was pushed back is that you actually have up until July 15th to make IRA contributions and other types of contributions like an HSA or an ESA, an education savings account. You actually have up until July 15th to make contributions for 2019. So it's actually like going back in time, kind of. So if you didn't max out your IRA or your HSA or your ESA for 2019, you actually have a couple more weeks to do that. But that's actually not unique to 2020 and coronavirus and all this stuff. You actually have every single year, you actually have up until tax filing deadline. Usually that's April 15th for most years. You have up until tax filing deadline to make that contribution for the previous year. So again, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like a time machine where if you miss that contribution for the previous year, you've got a couple extra months to make that up. The last thing that I wanted to touch base on, and I have to preface this, again, our lawyers want to make sure that we preface this with this. Again, this is not tax advice, and you definitely want to talk to a tax advisor and your financial advisor before you make any of these decisions. But I wanted to talk through, especially now with these crazy volatile markets that Brandon touched on, there is a big opportunity for what we call a Roth conversion. Now, as I mentioned previously with the RMDs, those required minimum distributions, if you have a pre-tax account, again, an account meaning that you haven't paid taxes on that money just yet. If you have a pre-tax account, whenever you take money out of that account, you still have to pay taxes on that. Now, on the other hand, if you have something called a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, that is after-tax money that you have already paid taxes on. And so in most cases with the Roth IRA or Roth 401k, if you take money out of that account meeting certain criteria, that money is going to be completely tax-free. So how do we balance those two things, right? On one end, we've got a pre-tax account where we still have to pay taxes. And on the other hand, we have a Roth account where we're not going to have to pay taxes on. How do we get money from a pre-tax account to a Roth account? One of the easiest ways to do that is through something called a Roth conversion, where essentially with a Roth conversion, we say, all right, we're going to determine a certain amount of this pre-tax money. So whether that's a set dollar amount, maybe it's the full account value, we're going to pick a dollar amount that we want to convert from pre-tax to after-tax Roth. Now, when we do that, we are going to owe income taxes on that conversion. So with the markets being as volatile as they've had over the past few months, when accounts are down in value, generally that's usually a good time in most situations to look at a Roth conversion. Because generally speaking, the lower the account value, the lower the taxes that you pay. The higher the account value, the higher taxes that you pay in a Roth conversion. So while it may not be a perfect scenario for most people in most situations, again, if the account is at a lower value, it may make sense to use that time to convert that money from pre-tax to Roth, essentially turning that money into non-taxable, from taxable to non-taxable. So again, while it's going to be different in every situation, especially this year, while the markets are volatile, it may be an option in your situation that you may want to take a look at. But again, make sure you consult with your tax advisor or your financial advisor to make sure that makes sense in your situation. So that was really it for those 3 items here. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them in the chat. We're definitely going to go through the Q&A later towards the end of this session. But right now, I want to turn it over to Betsey Rubel. Betsey is an estate planning attorney that our firm has worked really close with over the past, Brandon, how many years has it been that we've been working with Betsey?
Maybe 10?
It's been a while. I know dozens and dozens of families she's helped out, and I'll speak from experience. I don't know if there's any attorneys on here. Maybe I shouldn't, but I don't know that there's a more down to earth, easy to talk to. Some attorneys have ego. So does a financial advisor. So that's. But Betsey is just a great person. That's just a great resource on all things estate planning. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and I enjoy working with both of you as well. I'm happy to be here today. So I focus my practice exclusively on estate planning and probate administration. So I've been practicing for 20 years. I'm a solo practitioner. So when you call, it's me that you're talking to on the phone. I love this area of law because I really get to meet a lot of different families and help them with their estate planning and kind of walk them through it. I think it can be like an intimidating sounding process, and it's something that a lot of people have on their to-do lists, and it feels really good to kind of work through that and get that process done. So estate planning is really about giving, putting your decisions down, giving your family peace of mind for what happens in the future. Not necessarily, fun topics to talk about, but it's something that's really important. And one of the biggest comments I get usually after we've completed an estate plan is people are so relieved it's done and they've kind of checked that box and got that off their to-do list, because it really does feel good to get it done. And also, if you have anything, feel free to type in the chat any questions that you might have as I go through this. But basically, in terms of what estate planning is, primarily there's going to be a lot of legal documents involved in estate planning. So it's just a comprehensive plan that details what your wishes are upon your death, but also if you were to become disabled. So you're going to have documents involved in your estate plan, but it also is going to include making decisions strategically about beneficiary designation, property titling, insurance, retirement assets. We look at all of those things and how they work together. So it's really important that you have these legal documents, but yet it needs to be coordinated with all your other accounts as well. So that's an important part to make sure that we have that all together. So I'm going to first talk about the 4 basic estate planning documents that most people have. So it's going to be a will. The will is where you state what you want to happen to your assets upon your death. When you have a trust, you have a different sort of will called a pour-over will that basically just states I'm giving my assets to my trust. And then the trust is the document that will spell out how assets are distributed. So the will is also the document where you would name a guardian for any minor children. So that's an important document there if you have young kids. With the trust, it's something that you would do in addition to a will. Most of my clients do a trust. but not all of them. It's usually something that is determined by many different factors. The primary two reasons for doing a trust are going to be to avoid probate on any assets that are in the trust. And so you avoid probate by titling assets in the trust during your lifetime. That a lot of people, probate is the court process that you would have to go through if you died and owned something in your own name. Most people want to avoid it because it's costly. It's a public process. And it just can take a long time. So by having a trust, you avoid having to go through that process. In addition, a trust also gives you way more control over how assets are distributed. So an example of that would be if you have young kids or beneficiaries who you may not want to leave assets to them outright, you have a concern about how they might spend that money, you would do a trust and then state that they could use assets for their college education or different kind of needs they had, medical expenses, living expenses, and then you could distribute to them over a period of years just to kind of protect the beneficiary and to protect your asset. So those are really the two major reasons someone does a trust. It works very well. It's easy to administer when it's done right. So in addition to the trust, a power of attorney document would be the document where you're going to state who would make decisions for you if you were disabled. So this is important to have. If an example would be, let's say you have a checking account and you're the only one on there and you have to go into a nursing home or you're disabled in some way, you need to make sure someone is able to access that to file your tax returns, to pay your bills, to take care of details like that. So that's the power of attorney document. And then the last one is a patient advocate designation, which is a medical power of attorney. And so that document is where you state who you would want to make medical decisions, who would make medical decisions for you if you were disabled. So this is the document that you would give to the hospital or a doctor, and it just lays out who they need to look to if you can't make your own decisions, and it additionally lays out what your wishes are specifically in terms of life support. So it's important to have that. So if something did happen to you and you were in the hospital and needed some help, the doctor would know exactly who to look to for that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process during COVID. So this has been interesting. A lot of times, estate planning is an important topic, and it seems like during this time, a lot of people are focused on kind of getting these things done, and they're home and they're thinking about these things. And it had initially been a challenge because with estate planning documents, there are several different witnessing and notarization requirements. And so it's, normally it would be a face-to-face meeting with a client to sign and execute documents. Because we can't do that anymore and keep everybody safe, there's a new executive order that allows for electronic notarization and witnessing. So what I've been able to do is execute documents with clients via video conference and be compliant with all the laws regarding the execution of documents. So this has been really helpful for people who, if we can't meet together. I've done several where a client is actually in a nursing home and is not able to leave, and nobody can go in there to see them and have urgent matters. So this has been helpful. To talk to you a little bit about the process, how that would look like. Now, this is something that's specific to my office, how I've handled things. We are able to meet face-to-face now if there's social distancing, but a lot of clients still prefer to do this virtually. So basically, this is how, what you would expect in terms of a virtual meeting. I would do a video conference or initial phone call where I would ask a lot of questions. I would answer a lot of questions. We would go over your goals, what type of documents you would need in your estate plan to kind of start the drafting process. From there, I generally send my clients a list of, kind of a recap of what we talked about and give them a list of some things to continue to think about, any documents they need to get back with me on, and kind of give them those to-dos. From there, once I have all the information gathered, I draft the documents and email them to the client for review. Normally, I would review in person when we could do that, but now I send them via email, and kind of highlight the important things to think about and review, and kind of go back and forth to make sure we have everything right. And then for the signing, we do a two-way video conference where I have a witness with me, and I'm a notary, and so I watch the client sign the documents. So I can see them. They can hold up their ID if it's somebody that I don't know, and they execute all the documents that way. They deliver them back to me. I notarize, stamp them, and then deliver the originals to the client. So not the way it normally works, but during this process, it's worked pretty smoothly. I mean, I actually have been dropping the documents off sometimes at the client's doorstep with little tags so they can see how to go through them, and then we go through it on the video call. Just a few tips about that. I mean, it's a challenge in this virtual world. Everything is a little different. But you know, my tips to you in terms of working with an attorney is relationships are even more important during this time, because it's a different way of communicating, and you need to be really comfortable with the person that you're working with. So the face-to-face interaction, it's, you know, you're kind of missing that, and so it can be kind of awkward sometimes doing the video conference. So just make sure you have a good rapport with the person that you're working with. And then access, because I think it's really important to be able to answer questions and feel comfortable emailing, calling, you know, your attorney to talk about those things. So make sure that you can have access to be able to get your questions answered. And lastly, you know, don't rush. I mean, it can be a quicker process because it's a virtual process, but you want to make sure that you get it right too, and don't feel rushed in your interaction just because you want to get off the video screen with someone. So make sure you're comfortable with everything before you sign anything, and that, you know, we've gone through everything, and you know, don't feel forced to rush through anything. So that would be my main tips in terms of virtual communication. And I'm happy to answer any other questions for anybody. You know, it has worked fairly well to do the virtual video conferencing. So, you know, feel free to call if you have any specific questions about estate planning, but don't for sure let COVID stop any kind of plans that you would have in that matter, because it is still we're still able to get it done.
That was, I'd say, for a complicated topic that has a lot of moving parts, I think a really good overview just to see that, hey, the process isn't that intimidating. Sometimes the hardest part of all of it is to, you know, face these things, right? Nobody wants to talk about it. We have this in our office. It's one of these quadrants of it has things that are important and things that are urgent, things that are not important, things that are not urgent. Estate planning's not urgent. It's incredibly important, and those things never get done. Those not necessarily urgent, but very, very important. They just never get done because we don't have to face them today. You know, if you try to find positives out of this pandemic, I think we all faced our mortality maybe a little bit more than we had in the past, and that might be a good thing to you know, to talk through and start that process. One question, I know that okay, we got a couple of questions kind of coming in, but one, Betsey, can you talk about the difference or the kind of, if somebody already has an estate plan and maybe they did this 10 years ago when the kids were young, and it's probably out of date. I know, can you maybe give some recommendations on when and how often to review, and what might happen if you need to make some changes? You have to start from scratch. Can you talk on that maybe a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of timing for review, I usually tell my clients, you know, every 5 to 10 years, look over it. Or if there's something that has changed in your life, if you know that you want to change somebody that you've nominated as guardian or trustee, that's going to be a trigger to change things. Any major life events, you know, a marriage, a divorce, that sort of thing. If you bought or sold a business, if you have a disabled child, I mean, there's different things that would trigger you looking at it. And if you already have an estate plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start from scratch with a new one. We can work with the documents that you have and amend them. So a trust can be either amended or it can be restated, where you can kind of replace the language but retain the same name that you have, and that makes it easier in terms of you don't have to go back in and change, you know, titling on accounts or anything like that. So certainly it's, you know, a process, you know, to amend it's going to be easier than the initial process of starting from scratch, but it is something that easily can be done, and really any attorney can do that. So if I did your documents and then you move somewhere and you need to bring them to someone else to redo them, that's totally fine. And you don't necessarily need to go back to the same person. Anybody can take them and make the changes to them.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
The question is really who should look at doing estate planning. So really what should be that trigger for somebody who doesn't have an estate plan for them to actually start looking at that and to get in contact with somebody like yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's a misconception that like estate planning is for somebody who has a huge estate, but it's really for anybody who owns assets. If you have minor kids, it's important. There can even be, real simple estate plans where, the person's primary asset is a house. In that case, sometimes I do something called a ladybird deed to make sure the house passes to who they want it to and avoid probate. Just do a simple will, power of attorney, patient advocate designation. So there's a whole range of things that somebody might need, but it basically is more tied to what you own. What types of assets that you have. So there's not like a minimum amount, like you need to have X amount of dollars to engage in estate planning, because a power of attorney doesn't have, that doesn't relate to an asset necessarily at all. That's just somebody making a decision for you. So it can involve all of those things.
Good stuff.
And I had a few.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is everybody probably should investigate, especially if you have young kids and don't have a will. That's a scary thing, right? The courts are going to decide who's going to take care of your kids. That's you step up and have those tough conversations and put it in writing, because I don't think there's a better way to show that you love your kids by saying, hey, if we're not around, we've thought through this. All right. So at least starting there, and then having the discussion on where you go from there. All right, a couple other questions. I'm going to get one more over to you, Betsy, and then a couple other questions that I want to get to. Do you charge a flat fee or is it per hour?
So normally it's a flat fee. It depends. If I'm updating documents, occasionally I'll charge by the hour, but normally it's a flat fee based on what they need. And I always tell people ahead of time what the fee is. They know exactly what they're getting into after I sit down and review everything with them. So that doesn't change as we go through anything. But yeah, so I would charge hourly for like a probate administration or maybe some small changes.
I'll say one other comment on that, because I've hired attorneys in the past, and Betsy's available and is not like this robotic machine of billable hours. I've hired attorneys before where every email I sent is up to 15 minutes, so it's $75 every email. You're not getting into that, right? It's more of a process to kind of go through the plan. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, another question that came up, and I'll kind of combine them together. What sets Kennedy Financial apart? And then a follow-up was, do we charge for financial plans and are we a fiduciary? So those are all kind of loaded questions. I'll do my best in a short period of time to give a quick overview. I would say what sets us apart, and to be truthful, any competent financial advisor, and we are fully licensed. We do work with 99% of all our clients in a fiduciary capacity. That's we have a legal obligation to recommend what's in your best interest. We have transparency in our fees and what we do. But a lot of advisors can offer that. A lot of advisors work at good firms and can offer good advice. Where we're different is we have a process that we have developed and refined over the years for getting a deep understanding of the clients that we work with. No one is getting a cookie cutter financial plan or a cookie cutter investment portfolio. We have a deep understanding of what matters to you, your family, your job, and your plans for retirement, what you want to do in retirement for recreation, what's important to you about money. And then we take and put together a plan with things that we can control. We use our investment philosophies. We go through how our investments are going to be structured, and we educate you on that. And really it comes down to three main things. It's deeply listening to you and getting an understanding. That's number one, is listening. Then creating a plain English. In a lot of cases, we're moving towards a one-page overview financial plan that is very easy to understand. So number two is your plan. And then number three is ongoing communication course corrections. We're going to review your situation, because whatever we come up with today is going to be different. In an environment like this, it could be different every month, right? We could have job changes. We could have uncertainty about what's going on. I've had a lot of people come and say, hey, I want to retire now. I've kind of, I want to make some changes. And we sit down, we start the process again. We listen, we revise the plan, we make some course corrections, and we do that process year in and year out. So that's kind of what that looks like, and where we go from there. So, if you want to continue that conversation or reach out to us, I think there's some additional ways Stephen will pop up if you want to reach out and start that dialogue, because it really is a personal, decision that you want to take, and make sure that there's a good fit with the advisor that you work with. Yep, go ahead.
That deeply personal relationship, I would say that's the main thing that we really pride ourselves on is, again, like you said, Brandon, there's a lot of really great advisors at really great firms out there. But, we're based local here. And so our goal is that our team knows you. If you're working with our team, our entire team knows you. And you're not just account number 64219678. You are John and Jane Smith. I know that's the most unrealistic client name ever, but really it's who you are really matters most to us here. And so whether it's the lead advisors that you're talking with that day in, day out for your plans, to whether it's Nicole on our team helping you manage the paperwork, maybe you get her for booking a meeting, whoever on our team it is that you talk with, they know you, they know your plan, they know your situation, they know you and your family. And that's really what's most important to us here.
Good stuff. All right, we're probably pushing our time a little bit. I know we got a couple other questions. I'm gonna, I won't fault you if you need to drop off. A couple other that I think I have a good answer on one of these. What do you suggest for an individual that's been furloughed, possibly long term from their job? Stephen actually did a really good video and has a really nice piece on. We start with Dave Ramsey's a big proponent of this. Your 4 walls, right? You need to be able to have enough cash on hand and come up with a plan, even if it's very short term, 1 to 3 months. To I'm probably going to butcher your 4 walls, Stephen. You can jump in, but basically, we want to be able to keep our shelter in place, right? We have to feed our family and ourselves. What are the other 2, Stephen? I'm putting you on the spot. You're muted. You're muted. So shelter and food.
Yeah. So it's really making sure, making sure you have your 4 walls covered. So again, before anything else that you do, again, make sure that you've got food and groceries, make sure that you've got your lights and water paid for. Again, if you've got a mortgage, make sure you pay your mortgage payment. If you got a rent payment, make sure that you pay your rent payment. And then, of course, I know obviously it doesn't help if you don't have a job, and especially while we're all quarantined, stuck at home. But again, keeping transportation going. So if you do have a car payment, pay the car payment. Make sure that you fund gas, insurance, those things. All 4 of those things are the most important things that you can do right now. There are other bills that can wait, but if you take care of those 4 walls, that's what you need the most to get back up on your feet, get a new job, and get through these crazy times that we're all going through here.
Yeah, cash is king. Having cash on hand, even if you have to slow up on investments or stop investments or raise cash. That's usually some dialogue that we'll have of hey, how can we get through the next 1 to 3 months? Let's come up with a plan there, and then revisit that as we go from there. And unfortunately, that's we've had to have some of those conversations. But it's get through 1 month at a time, and maybe talk through before you take a big action step. Betsey, there's one other one on I don't know if you can see that, maybe a little bit specific, but if you can touch on where it has the name TRUA date and then revocable living trust. Can you get into that, or is that maybe okay?
So basically, when you provide a company with the trust information to retitle assets, you're going to provide them with the certificate of trust that's going to include the full name of the trust, the date it was created. I think this is more specific to each company, might have a way of kind of abbreviating that, so that's how their documents are going to spell out. But the basic thing is that you want to provide the correct naming through your certificate of trust, and spelling out revocable as opposed to the REV, LIV. it doesn't make much of a difference. It's more of how that company probably put it in their computer system. So as long as it's referring to the same trust, you want to make sure that you don't have two different trusts that you created at two different times.
Okay. All right. And then last question, I don't know if this is for us or for Betsy. Can you work with out-of-state people? We absolutely can. Our RIA is registered in every state. We, especially in this environment, but even with referrals and introductions of clients who maybe have a brother or a parent that lives out of state, we have a lot of clients who we have never met in person, and we, in this day and age with Zoom calls and electronic communication, everything signed, almost everything electronic signature, there's really not a disruption in our ability to serve our clients and work with them. And like I said, we're licensed and there's no issues there. Betsy, how about you?
I cannot because I'm licensed by the state of Michigan as an attorney in Michigan. And so because that's the only state I'm licensed in, I can only do Michigan residents.
Okay. That's the good and the bad of being an individual. Yeah. But honestly, it's a better experience to have a local person versus a big law firm that isn't going to take the personal approach that she does. So I wasn't sure who that question was directed at, but I think we covered it. So other than that, we're at about 50 minutes. That's I appreciate the good dialogue and questions. And if anybody, everybody's still on the call. Did you pop up the poll on future topics, Stephen, or can you do that?
Not yet.
Okay, so if you guys would take a minute just to fill this out, like I said, our goal, the last Wednesday of every month, we are going to be offering educational webinars in this format. We'll have a guest speaker on, an area, like estate planning that we're not necessarily experts are. We have partners in a lot of different fields, and we put a couple of suggestions: Social Security, healthcare, investments, tax planning. We have experts in all those areas that we can bring on. Go ahead and throw in the chat if one of those doesn't come up necessarily and you'd like to dig into a different topic. Please throw that in the chat and we will find somebody and get that on the schedule. The other thing I will mention, we have an upcoming video series starting next week, where we're going to interview some experts, a short 5 to 7 minute video that you can access on our website, on social media, and we'll have it available on different topics. This one is going to be on the auto insurance reform. We're going to have an independent property and casualty agent who I've worked with and recommended to clients. Who's a Dave Ramsey guy as well. And he's going to talk about some of those changes that go into effect July 2nd. So look for that video series starting. It'll be on social media and on our website, and reach out if there's any other topics that like I said, that's our goal, is to educate you guys. Those that are educated, that have a plan, that are working through a process, are going to have much better outcomes than those that don't. And we're happy to be a partner with you and help you guide you on your next steps in your financial plan. So with that, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Betsy. We appreciate you guys taking the time, and hopefully this was productive, and let us know if there's anything else we can do to help you guys out.
See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.